Hi, so approaching Pesaḥ, I'm going to try and cover at least some basic ideas, or rather basic practicalities that we should be employing to kasher the kitchen or the things that are in the kitchen. So let's start off with what in Israel is called the shayish, or the surfaces. The surface is probably the easiest thing to clean, to kasher, although it might make a little bit of a mess. So if you're choosing not to cover your surface, if you're going to cover your surface properly, you don't need to kasher it. However, if you're choosing not to cover it, or you want to kasher it just in case you're not going to cover it properly and so on and so forth, you would take a kettle full of boiling hot water, it's just been boiled, and pour it over the surface. This might take a couple of kettle loads, but every bit should get directly from the kettle. So you would just pour it over the surface and that surface is kashered. What's advisable to do before kashering the surface and any other thing that I will be mentioning here is to wait 24 hours without using any of the things you're kashering for hot stuff. So that means if you could make sure 24 hours in advance that no hot thing is directly going on your surface, that is very advisable. It's not a must, especially when it comes to surfaces, and especially if you're covering them, because if you're covering them, me'ikar hadin, you would not even need to kasher them like that. The same that I've just mentioned with regards to surfaces would regard to sinks as well, and the tap on the sink. So you would pour hot water over these areas, and that's kashered for Pesaḥ. Obviously, no use of hot Ḥametz after that. If you do, then it would need to be kashered again. The kettle itself, how do I kasher a kettle? So right now I'm talking about a regular kettle that most people would use during the week. You would boil the kettle, fill it up to the top, boil it, and pour water out of the spout. Pour the hot water out of the spout, and your kettle is kashered. I'm not saying that me'ikar adin, strictly speaking, it's probable that most kettles would not need to be kashered for Pesaḥ at all. They would just need to be cleaned. But it's good to kasher your general kettle, and it's easy to kasher it, so why not? It's only a gain. Shabbat kettles, they actually cause a little bit more of a problem because many people are accustomed to putting challah directly on the Shabbat kettle at its top on its lid, which would mean that the lid of the Shabbat kettle requires hag'alah. Hag'alah is a process of taking boiling hot water that's being boiled in a pot. The fire is still on underneath this pot and the water is bubbling. When the water is bubbling, you put in whatever it is that you are doing hag'alah to in that water for a couple of seconds. This is not like tevilat kelim, meaning you don't need to put the thing that you are kashering in all at once. The hot water doesn't need to cover the entire object in one go. It needs to cover the entire object, but not in one go. So let's say you're taking the lid on top of your Shabbat kettle. You would put that in and you could roll it around, but you should let it be in there, each part, for a couple of seconds, and make sure that the water, whilst it's in there, is bubbling. Then it's kashered. The lid of your Shabbat kettle is kashered. The rest of the Shabbat kettle is exactly the same as your regular kettle. You fill it up to its max, you turn it on until the water bubbles, and then you can release the water, you can let the water go out through its tap. It's also wise to just pour hot water from a kettle or a cup. It can be hot water that you've got from a cup, i.e. from the kettle into a cup, and you pour it over the spout of the Shabbat kettle as well. Hot plates, or Shabbat plata in Hebrew. Hot plates are very easy to kasher. You can just turn on your hot plate. This is after you've cleaned it properly, right? You clean it properly, you wait, leave it for 24 hours, and then you switch on your hot plate to its maximum heat. Some of them have knobs, I'm not sure, it's quite rare, but if you do have some knobs, switch it on to your maximum heat, to its maximum heat, and you leave it on for about 45 minutes. After that, your hot plate is kashered. Some people like to cover it as well. I've heard it could be a hazard, so everybody should do what they feel comfortable with from then on. Chacham Ovadia also suggests that hot water from the kettle should be poured all over the plata after you've done this kashering process. I'm not saying it's a must to do both methods, but it's a good thing to do. So you're covered on all fronts. With regards to hobs, let's talk about the gas hob first. Most poskim say the method to kasher it would be to leave on all four, let's say 4 hobs, 4 fires at once on full blast for about 45 minutes to an hour. And I have heard that it's better to put pots on. These don't need to be Pesaḥ pots, but just make sure that they're clean before you put them on. Fill them up with a little bit of water. They don't need to bubble over or anything like that. And put them on whilst these 4 fires are on, because that way the fire gets spread out more. The idea here is to get all the metal gratings around on top of the hob to their maximum heat, to the heat that they would, hotter or at least as hot as they've gotten at any point during the year. And you'll achieve this if all 4 fires are on and there are pots there, so the fire is really spreading as much as it could. Again, this is after you've cleaned them, you clean the metal pieces, and after you've left them for 24 hours. After that, it's wise to pour from the kettle over the entire area and the flat pieces that are actually just in the central part of the fire. You should pour hot water from a kettle on top of those, and those are your gas hobs kashered. Electric hobs, just leave them on full blast after cleaning them and leaving them for 24 hours. Leave them on maximum heat. It probably doesn't need as long as a gas hob. Just in case, keep it on for half an hour, and those are kashered. Dishwasher. Many poskim hold that you cannot kasher a dishwasher. However, the halacha is, especially for Sfaradim, that you may kasher a dishwasher. And this is how you would kasher it. Once again, clean them meticulously, especially the filter area. I've heard it's extremely difficult to clean. After they've properly been cleaned and left for 24 hours unused, take the empty dishwasher now, turn it on to it for a full run, hottest temperature that it could be, and use the detergent, use the regular things that you would use. And once it's had its full run, it is kosher lePesaḥ, as long as that process was done properly. The last appliance that I want to discuss is the oven. Oven is once again one of the difficult things to clean, unless you've got a self-cleaning oven. If you've got a self-cleaning oven, you turn it on to its full temperature. It cleans itself. It gets to a wonderfully hot temperature. You leave it on for an hour or however long its run is, and it's kosher lePesaḥ. A regular oven, not a paralytic. You would clean all the parts of the oven. I know this can be difficult. There's different chemicals that can be used. Mr. Muscle, everybody should take what they're comfortable with. And after it's been clean, you leave it for 24 hours. Then turn the oven on to its maximum temperature for an hour. This is with the trays and the gratings in the oven. On Pesaḥ, you should not put food directly onto the oven trays or the oven gratings. What you should do is use tin foils and cover with alu foil or whatever it is, the gratings and the trays. So you're actually putting your food not directly on those tin foils. That's how you kasher your oven. Getting to kelim like cutlery, glasses, Sephardim hold, firstly, a very important thing. Sephardim hold that glass does not need to be kashered. The Chachamim said glass is not bolea, doesn't swallow the ta'am, the taste of foods that go into it, even though they went into it hot. So glasses or anything made of glass does not need to be kashered. It just needs to be rinsed and cleaned well. It can be used for Pesaḥ. Some Sephardim have the minhag, like the Ashkenazim, not to do that and not to use glass or to kasher glass. If you have that minhag, wonderful. Keep your minhag. However, if you don't have a clear minhag, Sephardim do not need to kasher their glass. Any form of food utensils that are made of glass don't need to be kashered. Pyrax and Duralex, that's a big discussion, even for Sfaradim. It's best to do Hag'ala to them. In a case of strong need, if it's very difficult for somebody to do so, then they don't need to do it, that they can rely on the lenient opinion after not using it for 24 hours. However, what should be done in general circumstances when it comes to Pyrex and Duralex, Hag'ala should be done after it's been cleaned, left for 24 hours, then put it into the Hag'ala pot. Again, Hag'ala is when you have a pot full with water, the water's reached a temperature where it's actually bubbling, then you can put the Keli, the Pyrex dish in, and it doesn't need to be all in at once. Leave it there for a couple of seconds and you take it out. The minhag after Hag'ala, for anything, is to wash the dish with cold water. Don't do that with Pyrex. I know that's the minhag. However, the minhag was obviously not speaking about, was not referring to a case where you're doing Hag'ala to Pyrex, because that would actually shatter the dish. So you don't need to do that minhag of washing it with cold water after the Hag'ala if you are doing Hag'ala to Pyrex dishes. Most cutlery will follow the same procedure. You just put it in the Hag'ala pot. However, the exception to this rule is ceramics and pottery, earthenware. Any of those things cannot be kosher for Pesaḥ, and therefore they should be stored away. They should not be sold, but they should be cleaned, make sure there's no actual Ḥametz there, run it through a dishwasher, and then put it away in a cupboard where people are not going to use them. Because these things cannot be kashered, the ta'am will not come out according to the Chachamim, and therefore store them away, make sure nobody's going to use them. Don't sell them, because if they're sold, then they would require tevilat kelim after Pesaḥ, because you'd actually have bought them back from a non-Jew, which would then make them obligated in tevilat kelim. If anyone has any specific questions, please contact me with regards to Kashering Kelim. Sometimes it's rather complicated, but I think we've covered the general rules and what every household needs to know. There can be specific questions, of course. Chag Kasher v'Sameach, and please God, this will be the last Pesach in Galut, and hopefully we'll merit the Geula Bekarov Mamash, with speedily we'll have the redemption, and we shall be in Eretz Yisrael. Chag Sameach.